Good day, everybody. In this video, I will show you the configuration steps necessary to create a unique experience for subaccounts. In this example, we will configure a policy that disables internet access between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. This comes in handy if you want to create an option for parents to be able to block internet access for their kids' devices when they should be sleeping. Using this same method, you can also build any experience that you want for subaccounts and allow the end user to determine which one is right for them. For example, blocking adult websites could be another possible configuration. Before we dive into the configuration, let's take a quick look at the demo from the end user's experience. First, browse to profiles within the portal and scroll to the bottom of the screen. Next, click Create Subaccount. Fill out the relevant details, including a unique Wi-Fi password. Finally, select an account group for your subaccount. In this example, the only option available are the business class service like the master account has, or they can select a restricted service that will block internet between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Then, at 10 p.m., or in the case of our lab, 2:55 p.m., the internet service for the devices using the wireless password associated to the subaccount will stop. And then the next morning at 6 a.m., or in the case of our lab, 3 p.m., the internet service will restore. Now that you've seen how it works, stay tuned to learn how to build this configuration in your RxG. First, we need to create two account group identities. The first one will be called Restricted 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. This one will be assigned by the end user to move the subaccount devices into a different policy so that they will have a different experience. To create an account group, we browse to Identities, Groups, and then click Create New under Account Groups. The priority on this group will remain 4. Next, we will create a second account group that will be used when 10 p.m. comes around. The RxG will use a time trigger and move the devices from the restricted policy to a temporary policy called Internet Blocked. Once 6 a.m. rolls around, the devices will be returned to the original policy. For this account group, the priority should be 5 so that it is a higher precedence than the regular account group. The next step will be to create policies for these two experiences. Let's click on Policies here at the top of the window to get started. The names of these policies will match the identities. For the restricted 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. policy, we're going to keep the same configuration as the business class policy for now. This includes a landing portal, a bandwidth queue, a subnet filter, a radius realm, and finally, we will associate the account group that we created in the previous step. Now, let's add our second policy for the Internet Blocked experience. This one will be much simpler and only needs to be associated to a radius server and the matching account group. In the next step, we will also associate an application filter that will block internet access. Let's go ahead and click Create. To create an application filter, we need to browse to Policies, Packet Filters. There are two parts of this application filter. First, we will build an application. This is how we identify the traffic to block. In our case, we will block all traffic, but this could just as easily be something like blocking Facebook. Click Create New under Applications, and we will call this application Everything. Now, to block all the traffic, let's set the destination port to everything greater than 0. Then click Create. Now, we will add the application to an application filter. Click Create New on the application filter scaffold. The default action of block and direction of outbound will work here. Next, let's identify the Everything application and ICMP so that we block pings as well. Finally, associate this filter to the Internet Blocked policy and then click Create. Now that the new experiences are available, we need to make them available for assignment by the end user. We do this by browsing to Billing and Plans. Click Edit next to the 1-month business class plan for this example. Find the section for subaccount groups, and we want to make 2 plans available. The original one that matches the same level of service that they purchased, In our case, that would be the business plan. And second, we would add the restricted plan. Once you have checked those two boxes, click Update. Now for the final step. We need to create time triggers to change the user experience between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Let's browse to Policies and Event Triggers. Under Space-Time Triggers, click Create New. In total, we will need to create 2 of these event triggers. Let's call the first one Block Internet 10 to 12. It will be associated to the restricted 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. policy. Set the start time to 2200 and leave the end time to 2359. Next, let's set the transient membership account group to Internet Blocked. This will be the experience of users between 10 p.m. and midnight. Finally, let's flush any existing connections at that time as well as delete the VLAN assignment forcing the client to disconnect and reconnect. We'll need to do this process once more for the hours of midnight to 6 a.m. That's it. Now the end user will have the option of setting up sub-accounts with a restricted experience. You could use the same process to create other experiences as well. For example, let's create an experience that blocks adult sites and gambling sites using the content filter enforcement. We would again start by creating an account group that gets assigned to accounts wanting this service. Let's browse to Identities and Groups, and then under Account Groups, click Create New. Let's call this account group Family Friendly Content. We will leave the precedence at the default level of 4. Click Create. Now, let's create the matching policy. Click on the word Policy at the top of the screen. Scroll down just below the policy map and click Create New on the policy scaffold. We will name this policy the same as the account group, Family Friendly Content. Let's attach the default landing portal and select the 50x2 with guaranteed bandwidth queue. We also need to attach the subnet filter here. Select the post-auth radius server. Finally, select the Family Friendly Content account group as the identity for this policy. Click Create. Now that we have created the identity and the policy, let's now create the enforcement. Browse to Policies and Content Filtering. Scroll down to Remote Content Filter List and click Create New. A remote content filter will source the list of domains to be blocked from a third-party service. There are several options to choose from. I have had a really good experience with UT1. Let's select UT1 as the provider and then click Create. At this point, we need to wait a minute or two for the RxG to go and fetch the list of domains from the UT1 servers. If you want to know exactly which domains are being blocked, you can download the file from this FTP link directly to your PC and take a look. The lists are text files and broken into categories by folders. Okay, let's click Refresh and see if the categories are now available. Click Edit. By default, everything is selected, which may be a bit too restricted. Let's select just a couple of categories for this demo. Let's select the categories of gambling and adult. Then click Update. Now, we need to associate this list to a content filter. On the content filter scaffold, click Create New. For consistency, let's go ahead and call this Family Friendly Content as well. You can choose any name that you want, it's just easier for me to keep the names the same all the way through. For this example, we'll be filtering based on the DNS query. The way this works is that if a client requests a domain on the list we provided, we will return an NX domain message to tell the client that the domain does not exist. Let's attach to this Family Friendly Content policy and click Create. Now that the Family Friendly Content experience is complete with an identity, policy, and enforcement, we now need to update the usage plan to make sure that it is available. Let's browse to Billing, Plans, and then click Edit on the 1-month business class usage plan. Let's scroll to the bottom to the sub-account groups, and then select Family Friendly Content. Then click Update. Alright, now that the configuration is complete, let's try out the new experience. First, let's log into the user portal using the master account. Click Profile. Before we go any further, let's jump over to the client machine and see how things are currently working. I'm going to open a command prompt and then do a DNS query for the pokerforum.com, and I see that it does in fact resolve. Now, back in the user portal, let's select the family-friendly experience from the drop-down and click Save. Now, jumping back to the client machine, let's run that query again. Here, we can see the non-existent domain message coming back. And if I open a browser and attempt to browse to that same website, I get a similar message here in the browser. So in this lab, we have created two different experiences that can be made available to master accounts to assign their sub-accounts. Also, just because I separated these into two separate experiences doesn't mean that you have to. Both the content filtering and the time triggers can be combined into the same plan if you wanted. Well guys, I hope you found this video informative, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.